All right, we're diving into a topic that's absolutely everywhere these days, semiconductors. You know those tiny chips that are basically in everything these days?
Yeah, it's hard to even think of something that doesn't use them.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And luckily, you sent in an episode of the Daily Semiconductor Industry Podcast with tons to unpack.
Definitely. Should be a fun one.
So, right off the bat, the podcast hits us with a big one. The White House is putting a cool $250 million into a brand new semiconductor workforce center. What do you make of that?
I mean, that's a big deal, right? It's not just about the money, though.
Yeah.
It's a clear signal that the U.S. government is really recognizing how short on skilled workers the industry is.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be a theme.
And this funding is all about getting more people into the field. It's about the future.
Makes sense to me.
Absolutely.
They even got into the specifics, like how Maricopa County Community College in Arizona is getting a chunk of that funding to train up more semiconductor technicians.
Oh, wow. So directly into the workforce.
Yeah, 300 more, to be exact. They'll be job ready in no time.
That's incredible. That hands-on training is so valuable, especially for jobs as in demand as those are.
Yeah, you're not kidding. It's like we're all hooked on the latest and greatest tech,
Totally.
which obviously means companies need more chips.
Of course.
And to make those chips, they need more skilled workers.
It's a no-brainer, but a tough problem to solve.
And that's where this workforce center comes in,
Makes sense.
trying to bridge that gap.
Smart move. And it's not just about filling the empty positions either.
Oh, interesting. So what else is it about?
Well, it has to do with fostering innovation, staying on the cutting edge.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's important stuff. Reports like the KPMG 2024 Global Semiconductor Industry Outlook have actually been warning about this talent shortage thing for a while now.
Really
Yeah.
makes you wonder if this $250 million is going to be enough.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question right there.
What else do you think needs to happen to really tackle this problem? I mean, we're talking long term.
Right, well, more investment in STEM education is a good place to start, but companies might need to get a little creative too.
Creative? How so?
Well, they could try things like apprenticeship programs or retraining initiatives. Maybe even look at how automation could play a role. Who knows? Anything's on the table.
It's a puzzle, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But while we're on the topic of big numbers, get this. Global semiconductor sales just hit a record in August.
Oh, wow, really? What was it?
A cool $53.1 billion. That's up a huge 20.6% from last year.
That's insane.
I know, right? The Semiconductor Industry Association is saying it's the biggest growth spurt we've seen since April 2022.
Wow. What's driving all that growth? I mean, that's a lot of growth.
Well, a lot of things. But one of the biggest, the AI boom, is just taken off.
Because, like, AI and chips are a match made in heaven.
Totally. But get this.
Okay.
The podcast said that while sales here in the Americas are through the roof, Europe actually saw a decline.
Interesting. A decline.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, the Americas, especially the U.S., have a really strong domestic semiconductor industry already.
That makes sense.
Plus, they've been really good at attracting investment in those cutting-edge factories and research facilities.
Oh, the fabs.
Yep, exactly. Europe, though, they've got some catching up to do.
So it's almost like every region is playing its own hand in this global semiconductor game, huh?
It's a good way to put it. Understanding those regional differences, the strengths and weaknesses, is going to be super important going forward.
You know what? You just gave me chills. That's actually a really good way to think about it. It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet, is it? It's about, like, global influence and who has the technological edge.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Speaking of getting an edge, we've got to talk about TSMC.
TSMC are...
They're building a huge new fab. That's what they call those factories, right?
Yep.
They're building one in Dresden, Germany.
No way. Really? So not just in Taiwan anymore?
Nope.
Yeah.
Germany. And it's not exactly a small investment either. We're talking $10 billion.
Wow, they're going all in. That's a huge sign of confidence in the European market.
It's like they're planting their flag and saying, we're here and we're not going anywhere.
Bold move, for sure. But smart, I think.
It does feel like it's part of a bigger trend, though. Remember those empty store shelves during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I feel like a lot of countries learned a tough lesson back then. Don't rely on just a few companies for something as important as chips.
Very true.
This whole TSMC move just feels like a piece of that bigger puzzle, don't you think?
Definitely. The pandemic really showed us just how fragile things are when it comes to global supply chains.
Yeah.
So now it's all about diversifying and making sure countries have more control over their own destinies when it comes to those all-important
It's
components.
like the whole world suddenly woke up and realized how important semiconductors really are.
Right, it's a wake-up call.
And you know what? They're involved in so many things, it's easy to forget about them. But they really are the unsung heroes of the digital age.
Absolutely. The things we take for granted would be impossible without them.
Which actually reminds me, we've got to talk about the electric vehicle revolution and its impact on the semiconductor industry. It's crazy to think that something so tiny could have such a big impact on the world stage.
It's true. And it goes way beyond where the chips are actually made. It's changing global politics as we speak.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. It's easy to forget about them because they're so small, but they're running everything these days.
I know. It's like they're the behind-the-scenes heroes of our digital world.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of things we can't live without, we got to talk about electric vehicles. That's going to be huge for the semiconductor industry, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. EVs need a whole different level of processing power compared to regular cars. It's not even comparable.
Oh, so it's a whole different ballgame.
Definitely. Everything from the battery to those fancy driver assistance systems, it all relies on these chips.
I can't even imagine what kind of tech goes into a self-driving car. And the crazy thing is the podcast mentioned some pretty big numbers for Europe, something like 240 to $300 billion they stand to gain.
Really? Wow.
But if they don't get their act together with semiconductor production, they could be looking at a $400 billion loss. Can you believe that?
No way. That's insane. It just goes to show how important it is to keep up with these industry changes.
Yeah, it's make or break time.
Exactly. The shift to electric vehicles is about so much more than just helping the environment. It's impacting everything. Innovation, supply chains, and of course, semiconductors are right there at the center of it all.
Right. And it's not just about making more chips, is it? It's about making the right chips, chips that can handle all the demands of this new technology.
Exactly. And that's where things get really, really interesting. We're talking major breakthroughs coming our way, like quantum computing, neuromorphic chips. Those are wild. They mimic the human brain.
Whoa, hold on. I have to process that for a second. Chips that act like brains.
I know. And we haven't even talked about new materials that are revolutionizing how we design these things. It's a whole new world.
Okay, so we're talking next level stuff here.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing.
It's true. It's a super exciting time to be following the industry. Forget small improvements. We're talking completely new ways of thinking about computing here.
So let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. For someone who's not a tech expert, why does all this even matter? What's the takeaway?
Okay, so basically, semiconductors are the building blocks of the future. They're going to shape everything.
Like everything, everything.
Pretty much. Healthcare, transportation, how we interact with the world, you name it, it's all going to be influenced by these little chips.
It's like those sci-fi movies come to life.
Right, and it's happening now. That's why we need to be talking about this stuff, because the choices we make right now about investments and policies are going to directly impact what that future looks like.
Wow, I've never thought of it like that. It's a lot of responsibility for such a small thing.
It really is. It's not about the technology itself anymore. It's about what we choose to do with it, who has access to it, and what kind of world we're creating with it. It's a big deal.
You're right, it's a big deal. It's easy to get caught up in the shiny new gadgets, but there are much bigger issues at play here.
100%. We need to ask ourselves some hard questions like, what kind of world are we creating? What do we want it to look like? This goes way beyond Silicon Valley. It's about ethics, policy, and our future as a society.
So we've talked about the present, but what about the future? What's next for these tiny chips that are having such a massive impact?
That's the question, isn't it? Everyone wants to know. But there are some pretty clear signs pointing to where things might go from here.
Okay, I'm listening. What kind of signs? What should we be keeping an eye on?
Well, one of the most fascinating things to me is how different technologies are all starting to merge together.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
We've talked about AI a bit, and of course, energy efficiency is huge.
Right.
But then you've got quantum computing on the horizon, cybersecurity becoming more and more important, and everyone wants faster, more powerful computing all the time.
There's a lot to keep track of.
It really is. It's like all these different fields are starting to blend together and influence each other.
It's like a giant tech melting pot.
Exactly. And you know what happens when you get a mix like that? innovation explodes. I think we're going to see some crazy new types of semiconductors popping up, chips that are designed for really specific things, stuff we can barely even imagine right now.
Wow. So it's not just about making the old chips smaller and faster anymore.
Nope. We're talking about inventing entirely new kinds of chips. Think about chips that can actually mimic the human brain. Can you imagine?
That sounds like something straight out of a movie.
I know, right?
Nah.
But that's the potential here. These chips could process information in ways that we haven't even thought of yet. It's really mind-blowing. This is why this industry is so fascinating to follow. It's constantly pushing the limits of what's possible, and not just technologically, but in terms of the impact it has on all of us.
It really makes you think, like all those sci-fi movies. They always say this changes everything. But with this, it's actually true.
It's true. I think the biggest takeaway here is that the future of semiconductors is about so much more than just how fast they are or how much data they can hold.
It's about the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about understanding how deeply these tiny chips are already woven into our lives and having serious conversations about the kind of future we're building with them. And those aren't just conversations for the techies. Everyone needs to be involved.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
When you're caught up in the excitement of a cool new phone or whatever, it's easy to forget there's a whole other side to all of this.
Absolutely. We need to be asking ourselves some tough questions like, what kind of world do we want to live in? What role do we want technology to play? These questions go way beyond Silicon Valley. We're talking about ethics, policies, our future as a global society. It's big stuff.
It really is. But even though it's a lot to process, I have to say, I'm feeling pretty optimistic after this deep dive. How about you?
Oh, me too. Definitely. There are always challenges, that's a given, but there's also so much potential for positive change. And the best part is, there are a lot of brilliant minds out there working hard to make the future brighter for all of us.
That's what I like to hear.
Ha.
So, to everyone listening, we hope you found this deep dive as interesting and thought-provoking as we have. And hey, who knows? Maybe one of you will be the one to make the next big semiconductor breakthrough.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Until next time, stay curious, friends, and keep those questions coming.